Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today's video is a catch up on my hexagon quilt. If you followed me for some time, you would have known that I'd started piecing together a hexagon quilt from a pack of pre-cut hexagons that I purchased during COVID. And they sat in the cupboard, were taking up space, so I pulled them out and decided to at least start putting them together into, with the template using the gluing method. And then I ran out of glue, so I thought, well, let's check out the basting method. So I did that, and then with not enough hexagons to really do too much, I started thinking about a composition that I could stretch them out. So my brightly coloured hexagons, which you'll see down on the bottom corner on the left, is the pack of pre-cuts I started with. And then to pad it out, I started thinking about colours, I guess not colours, blacks and whites, just to sort of maybe let the coloured hexagons bounce a little bit more. I tossed around numerous designs and settled on I guess an explosion from this bottom corner, like a confetti popper. So basically you pull the trigger on the popper and up into the air goes all of the confetti. So that's why it's just so dense around here, and then there's just a scattering in, the rest of the piece. So starting in the bottom corner allowed me to get scale by having those few up in that top corner, that turquoisey coloured bluey one up there. So then came the arduous journey of joining them all together. I can't decide if I'll ever do one again. There's aspects of it that I loved. Putting the paper into them and basting them, I could do that all day. That is just mindless, gentle therapy. Joining them together, yeah, the jury's out. It was good making them into the flowers. I could do that all day. But when it came to linking them together to make bigger pieces, yeah, that's where I was felt like I was wrangling a boa constrictor that just wouldn't conform. And yeah, but when it was finished, when I had done all those rows, I was like, oh, it's over. So it sort of got folded up and put to one side because I was thinking about, well, what am I doing on the back? What am I doing on the sides? I might just pause the video for a moment because I think someone's just knocked at the front door. Okay, I'm back. False alarm. So where was I? So I folded it up, put it away, and it was just sort of thinking in my head about it. What approach would I take now? Of course, the classic approach is to start quilting it. So attaching it to some batting and also selecting a fabric to go on the back of the quilt, and then away you go, quilt it all together. I don't know, I just couldn't let it go that easily. I sort of felt like I wanted to work it a little bit more. So hence where we're at today, which is the update for today's video. Now what I'll point out while we're from this distance is some straight lines of stitching over here on this side. You can see that I've come with some black thread and start doing plummeting straight lines through all of the flowers except for the colourful ones. You may have already picked up on it while I was sort of catching you all up to speed, but the rule I gave myself, and this is I guess where my slow stitch head came in, I could have just quilted, like finished it off, which I would have done in the past, but now that slow stitching and collaging and thinking about texture and layers and all of that has come into my world, I sort of said, okay, well at this point I'm going to abandon the standard procedure and I'm going to have a play with this quilt. And I guess the just because quilt was something that sort of broke all the rules in my head and opened up a whole new way of looking at my textiles. If they were a quilt top, well, why couldn't I apply that thinking to a grand slow stitched quilt is sort of my logic here. So I need some rules because I work well within parameters, and then I'm a very fast worker. Once I've worked out what I'm doing and I have in my mind the exact parameters, I'm off and racing. So the rule was straight lines through the flowers that were black and white. So I got my ruler out and started doing those big long lines. As soon as I bumped into a flower, let's say the colours, I stopped and then picked up the line at the bottom of the flower and continued on. So if you have a look at that red stripy one there, I've come down from the top through one flower and then a little black connecting hexagon, stopped and then picked it up below that red flower and continued the line down. Same with the green and of course the one at the very top. And if you look down in here, you can see it probably even better, where I'm just shooting down in those straight long quilt classic lines, but then bumping into a flower and doing something a little bit more decorative. So just back it up a little bit, I laid the top onto the batting and I tacked it down, but I didn't put any fabric on the back. And you're probably thinking, there she goes, she's off doing it just because. So there's nothing on the back, which is just like a breath of fresh air to me, because that allows me to have a think, have a ponder, and think of something to do on the back. Got a few ideas rolling around in the head, but no rush. Part of my creative process, I've come to realise, is the thinking of the idea. The execution is just man hours, just needle, thread and going for it. But the planning of the project and the possibilities that you could do and how much you do or how little you do to something is probably where I get my most enjoyment. So now I've got a lot of straight lines to do, a lot of little floral hexagons to go around, and also think while I'm doing that about the back of the quilt. The one idea I've got at the top is 3 or 4 or 5 pieces of fabric pieced on the back and then create a stitched line to quilt it to this quilt. Now I learnt through the Just Because quilt that I can easily do running stitch. I'm just grabbing that because it's sitting behind me on the couch. I learnt by doing this one that I can work on the one surface with that same wadding in between and then come back at a later date and create a whole new surface, and still doing camphor stitching, but it doesn't penetrate through. So I guess this piece, this Just Because, just gave me the confidence to try with a classic quilt top, is what I'm trying to, I guess, say. Now what I might do is just zoom in, because I'll go to my desk next and do a little bit of stitching. And I thought before we go and squinch it all up under the camera on my desk, I'll just zoom in a little so you can have a look at the florals that are bright. So the hexagon flowers that are bright. Okay, so another rule other than a straight line was, if I get to a flower and the background is nice and light so that my black contrast thread pops, I go around the hexagon. If I get to a flower like the navy one there and it's a little bit lost because there's so much happening in that particular floral print, I just go around the perimeter of it. Now if you have a look at the little hexagon flower here, I did just go around the perimeter because I've got a heavily stitched orange one, we'll call it, a heavily stitched yellow, and then there's this blue. So that apricot just got a gentle treatment with perimeter only. So can you see what I've been up to? This little flower here is perimeter of the hexagon flower only. There's an orange one there and a red. So yeah, I guess to keep it interesting for me so I don't feel so machine-like, I'm meandering through those flowers and just sort of having a glance around what's in the vicinity that's sitting on my lap. Because when these things are on your lap and you're working them, you can really only see about, 2, 4, 6, 8 flowers. So that's all I'm concentrating on. So I have a glance and go, all right, well, you're pretty heavy in your print. We'll go around the perimeter. You're going to be great for a more detailed treatment of the actual hexagon. by going around each individual hexagons. And I love the effect it's giving me because it's just sort of mixing it up a little bit more. And then with these plummeting lines coming through, I just feel like I'm getting bang for my buck. When this piece is on my lap, it's changing all the time. Not only is it like one day I pick it up and it's sitting there and it's like, oh, it's a black and white quilt with a little bit of colour. The next day I came back to it and it's like, oh, this is so colourful. It's like I can get, I guess, the quilt feeling for the mood I'm in. Does that make sense? So that sort of leads me to the back of the quilt, that I've got lots of options to play with something on the back. And I was thinking blues and pinks and things like that. But then this morning I was thinking back to my flower sacks, and I've still got a few of them in my cupboard that I used on the Just Because quilt. And I thought, oh, maybe I do a bit of a Just Because flower sack treatment. Who knows? Who knows? I've got a lot of stitching to do. I'm about halfway through the lines on one side. There's lines to do on the other. And the hexagons, oh my goodness, there's days and days of stitching. So I might pause the video. I'm going to relocate everything to the table, and I might as well do some stitching while I have a yibby yabba to you guys. Okay, catch you all in a moment. I'm still here on the floor. I was just saw the screen on my iPad and it was just a great photo shot for the thumbnail. So I just took a photo, and I even noticed that down here you can see my tacking stitches. So it's a real process. There's the tacking, there's the start of all these hexagons being highlighted, and then these straight running stitches. And yeah, I just took a screenshot, and I'll use that on my thumbnail. But I thought I'd mention that the tacking is in place, and as I'm going I'm removing it. I love doing that because it's like you get to see the quilt finished. Well, not finished, but you know what I mean. Once you get those tacking stitches out, it's like removing pins and or your work's just holding. It's just, I love that feeling. So yeah, anyway, I shall now move myself to the counter. Okay, nice and comfy at my desk, and I've got my basic tools here. I just wanted to mention the thread. Now, I ended up choosing Wonderfil Pearl Cotton number 8. I purchased this from Dewdrop in Hervey Bay, and I have seen it a lot on my travels. Like a lot of the quilt stores have this pearl cotton from Wonderfil. It is available online as well. Now, in my decision to use this one, I did have a roll I picked up at a thrift store of DMC number 8. So, you know, size-wise, technically the equivalent. And I'll just show you the difference. So there's DMC's the bottom one. That's DMC, and that's Wonderfil. So as you can see, there's quite a difference in the diameter of those threads. I don't know if there's a weight on there. 5 grams. No, it doesn't really give us a ply scenario. Egyptian cotton is the Wonderfil. And yeah, 10 grams. So double the quantity on the ball of the DMC, so probably more cost effective, considering I'm now on my second roll of the black, and I'm really moving through that as well. So I did pick up a third, and I think it'll be just enough. So I decided to go the Wonderfil because it's thicker. And I felt like this quilt, because it's so bold in certain areas, I needed the thicker thread to hold its own. I'm just going to stitch while I yibby yabba otherwise I'll, you know, this is 22 minutes of stitching that I would be missing out on. So yeah, I just sort of felt like the Wonderfil held its own, and as I sat down at my desk, I must have run out of thread here and not quite made it to the very end. So I'm just going to do this little bit, and then I can, you know, move on to somewhere else. So really happy with the Wonderfil. If you would want a finer look, the DMC would be the way to go. And I've done a lot of camphor quilting, running stitch in the DMC, And it's beautiful when it's, say, going over precious prints that you really want to see the precious print. But if you want your running stitch to be more predominant, have a look at the Wonderful range. You just get, you know, a stronger colour. Now these lines that I've drawn here, I've just used my ruler, and just by eye I've worked out the middle of all of these hexagons and then run my black friction pen through to create the line. You can use one of those scoring tools that make an indent if you don't want to draw on your quilt. I did try it, but I found that by the time I picked up the piece and went to the couch, it had sort of disintegrated a little bit, that line, and I also don't think I had good enough light to get the contrast to see the indent, so I sort of gave up on that idea. And I just went through, did a heap of running lines. The good thing about this is if I feel like doing just straight lines, say I'm interested in a movie, I can do a bit of that work, or if I'm listening to a movie, not too concerned about, you know, watching, I can do some of the flowers, and, you know, you've got to keep your, I guess, wits about you a little bit more. Now, edging, this has been a real think tank too. So I've got this corner here, so let's just talk about the edging. At the moment, the jury is still out, and I came very close to doing, I know you'll go, oh, you just do a half hexagon and put it in there, and your edging is straighter. Yes, I realise that, and I couldn't be bothered. So that was my first comment there. So don't suggest filling it in. I'm over it. And then you could do a little guy here, a little diamond, and that would fill that in. Yep, also over it. I don't want the quilt any bigger, and I want to move on to the next phase. So my plan is to just straight line it straight through, and I've got my edge. Yes, I'm losing a portion of this hexagon. Maybe in hindsight, being this is my first one, I may have adjusted my end here, my finish, with that half, but I didn't. So it's just going to happen organically. So that's my first thought with the edge. The other thing, I'm thinking about the binding, you know, what I want to use, how I want to finish the piece, how big of a binding. They're all very valid points to make. Being that I don't want the quilt any bigger, I don't think, unless I find some spectacular fabric that does the trick as a nice big 6-inch border, I probably won't do that. But I'm definitely doing a little black fine border like that. Now this is 1 inch wide. Possibly, and I've only cut the one and I have enough fabric to do around, possibly I might add 1/2 inch to this when I actually cut my strips, because maybe I need it to be just that little bit bigger, but I'm not convinced. I want a hint of the black. I don't want to see the black. Does that make sense? But I feel like it'd be a lovely little statement to have a border come through that's just a little pop. So if that was tucked under, you see what I mean? Just a bit. I think it makes it more modern. Does that make sense? If you have those big sashing borders, I just feel like that's very quilty, and I like the idea of just that little fine edge. That might change as I do all this stitching. I love, like I said, thinking about all these things. And I find some days I walk past it and I'll pick up some fabrics from out of my stash and just sling them around it and just admire them and go, well, don't do you work? No, you don't. You do, but do I have any more of you? And then the whole lot end up back in the cupboard. So, yeah, jury is out on how the edge will be. But I'm really at the moment just thinking a simple little black polka dot edge. I just think there's so much happening with this quilt. It's gorgeous here with these. Look, when I move the quilt over here where it's really colour driven, Let me zoom up a fraction, guys. And you have a look at that simple black edge. Like that handles all of that colour. You see what I mean? You might disagree, but anyway, you can have an opinion. Doesn't mean I'll listen. But you never know. You might just say something that goes, ooh, didn't think of that. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Oh, I've got some tacking here I could remove. Sort of one of my favourite things to do. It's very therapeutic. You feel like you're achieving things when all those tacking stitches are coming out. So what else can I tell you about the quilt? I think that's where I'm at, mentally strategizing my way around it. Yeah, I guess I'm aiming for this flower here purely because I can reach it, and I've got a tiny little bit of black thread. I think I'm just going to let it evolve, guys. This quilt is, a work in progress. I've been at it, I'd have to have a look at the videos, for some time. I think it started at the beginning of the year, didn't I? Can't remember. So I want to enjoy it. I'm not in need of any quilts. My family have all been gifted crocheted blankets. Most of us live in Queensland, so they really don't need a round of quilts as well, and I don't want to give that much time to these techniques of quilting. So the slower I can do this piece, therefore dragging it into the slow stitch world that we're in, suits me down to the ground. And if I can explore another technique on the back of this, well, I don't know, that's 2 quilts in one. And I really like that. Like, I don't want to have a cupboard full of quilts. I've got a cupboard full of stitched pieces. I've got a cupboard full of stitched journals and snippet rolls. Like, it gets a bit much when it's a cupboard full of quilts as well. So the Just Because quilt, I guess for me, mentally, was a breath of fresh air. So that's where I'm at with this. It's going to morph into the slow stitch world. I had been looking around. I'm a bit of a fan of Dave. Now, Dave's a quilter, this young lad on YouTube, and he does the craziest, bravest things with his designs. And he would work into his quilt, whatever block it may be, some large feature elements, whether it's in Dave's world, it'd be a spaceship, a moon, could be a stag if it was Christmas. So I have sort of been looking at panels that have big, gorgeous prints. And I thought maybe I slow stitch a massive big goose over the quilt, or I don't know, something crazy like that could happen too. So stay tuned. I see at my 2 local stores, Howard Drapery and Dewdrop Inn, lots of panels, but I haven't stood and actually thumbed through them. I just know they're there. I don't want to fall in love with something and go off on a tangent until this stage is done. So steady the brain, girl, is pretty much my theory. So yeah, that's where I'm at with my hexagon quilt. It is slowly morphing into goodness knows what, because I don't know. I've had lots of decisions to make, thoroughly enjoying it, still pondering numerous other decisions. I was all set on this one lot of fabric. I had it out on the kitchen bench when I was starting the quilt, and I was like, oh yes, but I'm not sure yet. I've since been focusing just on the colour palette that this is, and the fabrics I had selected are very different. They're still bright, they're still pinks and blues and turquoises, but they're a different tone. This is very primary colours. The other one isn't. I'm not going to show you that yet because it's possible I'll change my mind. So, yeah. And those panels on the back, because I don't have in my stash a big enough piece of fabric to do the whole quilt in one go. I don't have backing fabrics anymore. I've sort of bought them as I needed them, and I certainly don't have any rolling around in my stash. Lots of scraps, that's my stash. So either way, I've got to piece something together because I don't want to buy something. So if I'm piecing it together, well, hello, we're back into the slow stitch frame of mind. So that's where we're at. So yeah, today's video is just to drop in, say good day, tell you where I've been with my quilt, the journey, and spend a few minutes doing a few hexagons. And then the rest of the afternoon, I'm running a bit of washing at the moment. So oh, look at that. I nearly picked up the DMC. Put it away. See, you bring it out and suddenly you pick it up. So the rest of the afternoon, I said to Gaz, find us a good movie. I think it was about 1:30 in the afternoon, 1 o'clock. So I'm thinking, while the light's still good, I might put a few hours into this today. I did a little bit of stitching this morning, but not a great deal. And I thought, oh, I might film a video later once I get some housework done. And then I'll settle into a few hours of stitching, this afternoon. So, yeah. What are you guys working on? Let me know if you've ever tried a hexagon English paper pieced project. I definitely think my stitching of hexagons together is somewhat lacking. You can see the morphos of my skills. Is that a word? The improvement of my skills. There's one flower I spotted somewhere and the dead set is a 1/4 inch gap between the two hexagons coming together. So I don't know what happened there. And the ones I did first, these colourful ones, there are so many stitches in the space joining them, like they're so densely stitched that I'm sure the fabric's just going to split and all fall apart anyway. Then there's others where I'm a bit slapdash and there's gaps, so they're going to fall apart anyway. So seriously, the more stitching I can do on top of this thing will help hold it together, I think. I tell you. I know I was watching some of Jennifer Clouston's older videos. I was had a few hours of stitching and I was like, oh, let's go back and catch her very early videos. And I was searching for the videos where she makes fabric rope. I remember seeing it way back. And I also found some of how she does her English paper piecing. And I was like, oh gosh. Lucky Jennifer's not sitting here next to me. She'd be smacking my fingers going, Corinne, that's not how you do it. But I can see where I watched her video with Mary Ann and changed a few little techniques and they're definitely a lot better. So, yeah, if you're wondering how to English paper piece, I'd highly recommend you go and watch that video. I might link it below just in case you're considering it and this has inspired you to have a go. So, yeah, you're probably wondering why I'm knotting all the time and not just continuing around the hexagon in a very efficient way. It's because I'm yapping to you guys and I'm not concentrating. So if I was clever, which, comes in waves, I would probably start there so I finish there and at least I could do 2. Which we might do because then that stops you knotting. So, yeah, that's why. Before you go and whack it in the comment. No use commenting on, you should do this, Corinne, because it's, often months after I've finished it, especially projects that are long like this. And I forget, unless you girls are sitting at the end of my desk saying, remember, Corinne, you need to do this and that when you do this. I don't remember. Life's too short to remember all the rules. Oh, well, that was my excuse when I was a kid. Naughty girl. No, I was a good girl. You could imagine it, couldn't you? A goody two-shoes. Wasn't much excitement around me. I was like, no, I won't do that because I'll get into trouble. Mum and Dad would be very disappointed if I did that. That was me. Very boring. So you might be wondering, what's my next project? Well, I don't know. Quilting wise, I definitely will do another one. I don't think it's going to be one of these. I don't know. No, it's not. It's not. Because I really enjoyed the last quilt I did, which was the Gosling quilt, where it was stitched together. Yes, all in segments, but it wasn't with the template. It was just drawing the stitch line on the piece of fabric, triangle, hexagon, whatever, and then right sides together and actually stitching it like you would a sewing machine. I really enjoyed that. And I sort of felt like that was a bit easier on my hands because it's not this stitch, 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 pulling, pulling constantly. It's a rocking of the needle, then the pull. Because I did find with this style of stitching is I had a little bit of joint pain. And I can't remember if it was Racheal or the two young girls in the UK that do a lot of this. Emma or Racheal made a comment that they were getting a little bit of joint pain. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Gosh, they do so much English paper piecing and they're so young. And then I started mine because I always watch those girls too. And bam, there was that joint pain. I'm like, ooh, here we go. Can't be having that. And I started to develop a bit of tennis elbow. Now, I think it was aggravated by some travelling I did where I was dragging 2 suitcases around America looking for vintage textile treasures. And in the process, there was a lot of twisting of those 2 suitcases on each wrist. And then I was sort of getting back into doing this English paper piecing. And I think that's what started the elbow. Then when I went to Japan middle of the year, I remember saying to Dawn, oh, I've just got this tennis elbow business. And I started doing a bit of research while I was sitting around in the hotel room by myself. I think it's Venus Williams. I don't think it was Serena. Venus Williams, the famous tennis player, the world champion many, many, many times over. She's got videos on how to improve your injury if you have tennis elbow. So I started doing those exercises and it was all in the thumb. She said that it's all coming from pressure of the thumb and fingers, A, on a racket or B, on a needle. And she started me doing these movements. You'll have to go and, find it. And in the process of stretching out the ligaments around those fingers, it releases the tension that's forming back up in the elbow and it can get to you as high as your shoulder. So please don't think I'm providing any medical advice here because, consistency on doing the exercises didn't continue, but it did make a big difference because while I was traveling in Japan for that week, I was doing it and I started to feel like the ligaments going up my forearm to my elbow was starting to limber up. So I thought, there's something in this. These world champions, these athletes might just know a thing or two. And it sounded very much like the injury that I was starting to really develop. I then put this quilt down and I thought, you know what? Don't go so hard on the one project, girl. Go and do something else. So that's sort of when the Mouse Chateau came along and I thought, I need to enjoy other, fudgy's just me out, so I just lost my train of thought. Not enjoy other things, but do other things with my hands that aren't so repetitive. And sewing, hand sewing, quilting, crocheting, and all those things, they're pretty repetitive if you, do the hours I do. So the Mouse House Chateau has been a breath of fresh air because I dove into that for about 5 weeks and my pain went. I think by just putting my needle down, I was still working on the Roxy Girls project, but that was sporadically because, you get your prompt and then you have a little play and that was it. It's this machine stitching. We've got to be very careful. So, yeah, I the chateau has been a blessing because it's just changed, I guess, the movement of my hands. And I think that's the key. More projects, girls, more projects. That's the secret. We need to start lots of projects, all different techniques, so that we're not, you know, hurting ourselves. And as I've said many times, I plan to live to 110 plus. So that's a lot of stitching. So I need to keep myself fit. I can't have my joints failing me because, oh gosh, could you imagine? Oh, imagine sitting on your hands. I remember being told to do that as a kid, you know, just sit on your hands, sit still. Oh, that was just torture. It was just torture. Put your hands in your pockets, don't touch anything. Oh, the trauma. That's just not going to happen, I'm sorry. So, yeah, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the miniature world. Oh, gosh, there's some fantastic miniature artists out there. And it's just more to watch while you're stitching. So, yeah. Last little hexagon in the centre here. Hey, Fudgy. Fudgy's just crawled out of his bunk. It must be time for afternoon tea. He's weary. He's not even jumping up. He's just sort of a gentle meow. He's nudging my shins. He might make an appearance. I'll finish this little guy off and then I might chuff off. See what film Gaz has found me. Oh gosh, I hope it's not like superheroes and Marvel or DC comic here. Oh, I just can't do it. I guess I could have a sleep. No, it's got to have a little bit of a story, you know. If it's historical, well, gee, I'm really, really liking it then. Okay. Let's cruise on into the last little hexagon. Well, thanks so much for joining me, guys. It's probably not as invigorating as creating a piece of slow stitch from thin air. That's fly by the seat of your pants viewing. It's just me rattling on, but I figured it was time for an update. I've got many hours of stitching here and I just didn't want to suddenly realise that I'd done all that stitching and I'd sort of forgotten all my theories that I'd put in place. I think that's all I sort of had to tell you. Here we go. Well, you guys have a great day. I'll mosey on. I might put that needle there and that'll be my next flower. Need some scissors and some thread and I'm off to watch a movie for the rest of the afternoon. Hey, Fudge, that's a good idea. He's thinking it is. He doesn't like it when I'm quilting because he can't get onto my lap. So I've got to put it down, let the Fudge jump up, give the Fudge a pat, and he's happy chappy. All right. I'm just patting the cat. Sorry, I should be saying goodbye to you. Stay focused. All right, look after yourselves. Have a great day, guys, and I hope you get some time to sit and stitch. See yous later. Bye.